Well, I wanted to thank you, Sally. This is Sally Quinn, of course, who needs no introduction, for joining me today on How She Led to Me. I'm going to be talking to you about the women in your life who have inspired you, but I'm just going to do a really quick intro. You were the first woman network anchor ever. When you hosted the CBS Morning Show, of course, star columnist for the Washington Post, best-selling author, Finding Magic and Silent Retreat, among other books. And I loved your On Faith column at the Post. I thought that was really, it got me really thinking about things that people don't talk about enough, these big questions in life. And so you're a trailblazer, and I can't think of anyone I'd rather talk to about the women who have shaped your life. So thank you for talking to me. First
Well, I'm delighted to be talking to you about this.
I, in the same way that you brought up things in your work and over the years, by the way, the interviews you do and the profiles you've written are so colorful. You might not remember your Susan Clow, Jimmy Carter. I absolutely loved that article. Um,
I've been wondering where she is. I haven't heard about her for years.
she passed away
Oh,
recently.
oh, that's right. I did see that. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, the way you described her, um, you just brought her to life in a way that I thought was really fascinating. So thank you for that. She was Jimmy Carter's secretary, for those who don't know. But um, I wanted to talk to you. First of all, you're a famous journalist, have had a huge career. Where did you grow up? Can you talk a little bit about how you got interested in journalism? And, was your mother supportive of you? Like, was there a woman in your life who kind of helped you believe in yourself and give you the confidence that you needed at the time when you started out?
Well, I'm an army brat, which means I never lived in one place longer than a year and a half growing up. I went to 22 different schools and we moved. We were just moving from one place to the other all the time. And so I had to learn very easily to adapt because you didn't have much time to make friends.
Yeah.
And then you were gone. Now, most places there were other army brats, so they all were in the same boat, and people knew what it was like coming in and going out like that. My
Yeah.
brother and sister hated it, but I just thrived on it. I loved it.
Why? What did you like about it?
I don't know because I'm a double cancer and cancers are real homebodies. But I just loved, but we had our little family pod,
Yeah.
through the five of us. And so we were always together wherever we went. It just seemed like one adventure after the other. Um, and so one of the things you learn when you move into a new school or a new town, you have to be careful the friends you make at the beginning. If you're in school, what happens is all the cool kids ignore you.
Mm.
And so the nerds want to be your friend because they don't have any friends. So they all want to befriend you. And if you befriend the nerds, the cool kids will never talk to you again
Yeah.
because you'll be part of the nerd group. So I had to learn, even though I was desperate for friends in the beginning, to stay away and just be reserved and not fall into a group that I didn't until I had a chance to observe who I wanted to be friends with. And
Wow.
once the cool kids saw that I wasn't going to fall in with the wrong crowd, then they accepted me.
That's you have like a lot of emotional intelligence then, I guess they would call it now,
Well,
right?
I don't know what it was, but it was very clear to me that that's the way it worked, and it did work that way. And
I love
and
that.
it didn't help. It didn't hurt. And if you were in high school, if one of the football players took a
Yeah,
liking to you, because then all the girls would want to be your best friend. So,
of course. Of course.
um, so that was what I learned there. And you asked about my mother. My mother was couldn't have been more supportive. She was my best friend. I worshiped her. I worshiped my father, but I adored my mother. She was the most wonderful mother you could ever have and the most supportive. And we never had a harsh word between us in my whole life.
Even
Not
your teenage years, you
not one.
really. Wow.
She and my sister fought all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't imagine that having a teenage daughter myself.
But I was the firstborn, and so, everybody was happy. My father wanted a boy, but he was thrilled that I was the firstborn. Then, when my sister was born, he really wanted a boy. So then my brother came later. I think my sister got the brunt of this. But and so I had my father's mother live with us,
Mm.
and she was a huge influence on my life because she was a school teacher and she didn't have any money and her husband had left her, and so she moved, traveled with us, and she took me under her wing, and so she was teaching me not just school stuff, but she was teaching me all the time and mentoring me. So that was incredibly important to me. I learned a lot from her. But I'm sorry about my throat.
Have water. Do you have water?
Yeah. Um,
Do you
sorry.
feel, I'm curious, a lot of people I've talked to about this, they say that their their mothers wouldn't have called themselves feminists, right? Because you're bridging this generational divide. Would your mother or your grandmother, probably not your grandmother, right? But the idea of being a feminist is like you're a bra burning Gloria Steinem kind of radical. When to me that's not the case. But was your mother someone who
No, no,
no.
no, no. She was my mother. She was she was from I was born in Savannah, Georgia. My mother is from Savannah, Georgia, and she was a Southern belle. And she met my father when he was stationed in the military at a small army post called Fort Screven outside of Savannah, and they had a dance for the bachelor lieutenants, and they took a group of Savannah debutantes out to the army post, and they had a dance, and my father and mother met there, and they were married a month later.
Really? What?
And she graduated from a local college, and then she had a job. And then when she married my father, they moved around. So it was very hard for her to ever work again. And she at one point got her real estate license. And so we moved someplace and she'd try to sell houses for 6 months and then we'd move a year and then we'd move. But she did make some money. She and she was a fantastic hostess. I mean, for an army wife, you had to be a good hostess. And she was fantastic. She was a great army wife. But my father said to her when they got married, I just want to say one thing to you. I am the army in the army. You were not. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do. And don't let anybody give you any orders because the generals' wives, the commanders' wives, would order the wives of uh, of the lesser, uh,
Yeah.
the colonels and the majors' wives. They'd order them around. And my father said to my mother, "You don't have to ever listen to anybody because if I can't make it on my own, then I don't want to make it." And so she didn't do the things that she didn't kowtow to the commanding officer's wife.
Good for her.
She stood her own and she had her parties and everybody loved her. She was a great Southern gal. And she only drank champagne.
Oh my God.
And she used to, but in those days, nobody drank wine. There
Yeah.
was no, you probably don't know this, but people didn't drink wine when I was growing up, unless you went to a fancy restaurant, they served wine. But mostly you'd go to a dinner party and people would have scotch and bourbon. That was it.
Yeah.
So she didn't drink any of that. So she'd always take her own bottle of champagne with her wherever she went.
Good taste.
In fact, she was buried in a bottle of champagne.
Oh, really?
Well, yeah, her favorite champagne was Perrier Jouet.
Oh, yeah.
And so she got this huge giant magnum of champagne, and she drank it with her friends. And she gave me the empty bottle, and she said, "I want you to put my ashes in this bottle and bury me in it." So my father died first, and he was buried at Arlington National Cemetery. And then when my mother died, I took the empty bottle to Gawler's funeral home, and I said, "I want my mother's ashes in this." They're always so proper at the funeral homes, and they also said, "Oh, okay,
This
all right, fine."
is new to us.
So then the ceremony at the Arlington National Cemetery, this military sedan, because this is a military burial, military sedan pulls up, and these two soldiers get out of the sedan and reach in the car and pull out this magnum of champagne, and they go 10 hut, and they march over to the burial spot, hut 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 hut, and put it down on this platform. And
God.
the army chaplain, who didn't know my mother, was standing there, and he sort of said, "We're gathered today to celebrate the life of," he looks at the champagne bottle, "Mrs. Quinn."
Oh, that is the best. That is the best story.
So, I mean, that was my mother. She was a lot of fun. She had a great sense of humor and a great personality. And she defied tradition.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, she wasn't rebellious in any way. She just did things her own way.
And how old were you when she passed away? Was she able to see your success as a writer, or was she what was your kind of career like at that?
Well, I was in my 60s when she died, so I was well on my way. But,
That's
and she was very proud and pleased. And one of the problems was that I was working for the Washington Post, which is a very liberal newspaper, and
mm,
a lot of things I was writing were had a liberal slant. And my father was in the military, and he was a Republican. And although you don't announce what you are in the military, but they were conservative. Their best friend was Barry Goldwater, for instance.
oh.
And so, so they would go to parties, and their friends would attack them, you know. So even though they were very proud of me, they, they
Daughter.
sometimes would say, you know, whatever. People would come up and say, "Your daughter, how could your daughter, or how could she work for that communist newspaper?" And they kept calling me a pinko.
Oh my God. I love that. I can't talk to you without, by the way, asking what your and I've read some of what you've written in the New York Times about the Washington Post. Are you in the climate in Washington now? This is not in keeping with the theme, but in general, are you feeling there's any cause for hope? I mean, I had seen you do, I think it was with Maureen Dowd when you were doing you were at Politics and Prose talking about Silent Retreat, and you were talking about how Jeff Bezos hadn't yet meddled in the news side of the Post. Do you think that's still the case? Are you concerned? I mean, now we see the opinion page obviously being decimated. And I guess the bigger question is the climate in DC is kind of depressing. Do you see hope for the future? Do you think things can turn around? Or do you think Trump has changed the presidency in such a way that when a Democrat comes in, they'll behave using some of these kind of that there's no precedence in place anymore. You can wreck the East Wing, you can do whatever you want, essentially.
Well, as Trump points out, I'm president of the United States. I can do anything I want to. And he's right. So far, so good. You know, every atrocity has been without consequences.
Yeah, and it must be painful for you watching the East Wing because you covered the East Wing as a journalist. And have you heard from women who worked there and men who worked there over the past year or so about
Not this crowd. I don't hear from this crowd.
the people?
Particularly this administration. I mean, his first administration, he hired some real people, you know, who he didn't know he didn't understand what it meant to hire real people who said no to him. So this administration has got all yes men and women, and they're all toadies, and some of them are more outrageous than he is. So, you know, they just fan the flame. So I don't hear from this crowd. But in terms of the Post, I do feel a bit hopeful. I mean, I think that what Bezos did, I mean, basically the Post was dying. I mean, uh, in the last year, all of us have been in a state of grief. That's the only way I can describe it. A year ago, we were in such a state of grief that you couldn't even talk about it without being in tears. And every day was a farewell party for somebody. who was leaving, who either got fired or quit the paper. And and after Jeff yanked the endorsement for Kamala Harris from the op-ed page, editorial page at the last minute, that there was an exodus. Everybody just walked out. And then people started getting fired.
Hmm.
But that was, I mean, there we've lost about 300 of the top stars, reporters and editors in the paper. And it was decimated, and the morale was on the floor, and it was just horrible. And we had a publisher who was just a disaster. And and Bezos didn't seem to be around. I mean, he was sort of
Mm.
AWOL, and so nobody knew what was going on. We have a pretty good editor now, who is Matt Murray, who's a very good guy, and he managed to stabilize the paper and calm things down. And he's a good journalist. He was editor of the Wall Street Journal, and he's gotten things back on track. And I think that Bezos was shocked by the reaction to what he did. That and then firing the editorial page editor, David Shipley, and putting in this young guy who just
Yeah.
flamed out about a month ago after a year there, which was a complete disaster. And everybody knew it from the beginning.
Hmm. Hmm.
So the op-ed page is in total turmoil. The editorial page is in complete turmoil. But the news side is fine. And I think that Jeff, from everything I know, has not interfered with the news side. I think that would be the red line. And I think if he did, you'd see a mass exodus.
Okay.
And
That's
so far, people have confidence that Matt Murray will hold the line.
good.
I just don't. And there's a new publisher now, Jeff D'Onofrio, who is a terrific guy. And he is exactly, he's a finance guy. And he says, look, I'm a finance guy. I'm not a journalist. And there's a lot about journalism I don't know, but I know that I like and admire journalists, and particularly the people who work for this newspaper. And he's determined to get it back on track financially.
Good.
So, and recently the Post has been breaking a lot of stories.
Mhm. Yeah.
I'm stunned at how well the Post is doing, given the fact that we have almost no resources at the moment, no money, and so much of the talent has fled. But I said to Mac Murray one day, who are all these bylines? I don't recognize any of the bylines. He said, there are all these younger reporters who were just there, but they couldn't rise up because there was so much talent on top. But now suddenly they're out there going gangbusters and getting all these scoops.
Mhm.
So I think the morale is a little bit better in the last couple of weeks. We had the great story of Trump
The plane.
uh, on the airplane, yeah, switching planes.
Yeah.
That was broken by the Post, and that was a great story. And everybody kind of looked around and said, "Oh, yeah, the Washington Post," you know.
Yeah.
So that's really raised the morale a lot, that story.
Yeah. No, that was an incredible scoop. So back to the women, because you mentioned your mom, you mentioned your grandmother. I'm curious if there are women in the business that you've befriended along the way, colleagues, mentors. Have there been women who have really helped you? I know in some cases, Nora O'Donnell and I wrote this book called We the Women about women through American history who have helped shape the country who people don't recognize. And I think that sometimes Nora will say this too, that women can be each other's harshest critics also. Did you feel that there were women at the Post who were helping you along the way, or was there a sense of there are so few seats at the table for women in this position as journalists? There was kind of a competitive ness there.
Yeah, well, there weren't that many women editors when I started, and Ben Bradlee hired me personally and to write for Style when Style was about 3 months old. And and what he did was he took that was called For and About Women, it was the old women's section, and he turned it upside down. He said, let's make it into a feature section for everybody, not just women. Kay Graham was not at all happy about it. She thought it was a terrible idea.
Oh yeah, I mean Catherine Graham, was she somebody who helped you? Because I mean her memoir is so incredible. My God, what an amazing woman during Watergate. But was she somebody who was?
Well, I was getting to her.
Oh, get to
Um,
yes, get to her. Sorry.
but at that point, she liked the Foreign About Women. It was such a um, it was such a novel idea to get rid of the women's section. Every newspaper had a women's section and turn it into a style section. Now every paper has a style section all over the world. And people talk about Watergate. I think that that was the best, most important thing Ben did in terms of the culture is get rid of the women's section and make it into a style section. I think that's his most important accomplishment.
Really?
Yeah.
Beyond even more so than Watergate.
Look, I mean, culturally, look what it did culturally to the whole world, to every newspaper and look at the New York Times has a style section. There's a magazine called In Style. Most newspapers have style or culture or whatever else it is.
Mhm.
But the women's section was kind of like a sort of Siberia, they put all the women's news in there and make it's not important.
Mhm.
And so when I started Style, there were what Ben had taken the best writers from various sections in the paper, like sports and Metro, and put them all in one section so that we still covered the women's stuff, but we also had people doing cultural stuff like the beatniks, the hippies, and this is the 60s, and 68 and all the what was going on with the music and the lifestyle and when I got there, I was given a desk right next to this guy named crusty old guy in his 60s named Phil Casey. And Phil had sort of white hair and stubbled beard, and he smoked constantly cigarettes, one right after the other, and his sleeves rolled up, and he had this growly voice, and had come from night police. He was a police reporter,
Wow.
and but he was well known in the paper for being a great writer. And so I sat down and I was really nervous and said, "Well, let me tell you something, kid," because I was hired to cover parties.
Yeah.
He said, "You got to cover parties the way you cover a crime. There's always a perp and there's always a victim. Just remember that." He wasn't wrong, actually. I kept that in mind. And then there was a wonderful society columnist, not columnist, writer named Dorothy McCardle, who was a little sweet
Oh yeah.
white-haired old lady who was very funny and very sharp. She had covered police in Philadelphia.
Really?
Yeah, and she ended up being on the night social circuit.
Yeah.
So she took me out to my first party, and it was an embassy, my first embassy party. We walked in the room. We headed but she turned to me and she said, "Okay, there's only one rule you have to have." And I said, "What's that?" She said, "You have to have a drink before you do this." Marched over to the bar and ordered two Dubonnaise on the rocks. Gave me one and said, "Okay, let's go."
You liked her already from the start. I love that. I love that. I wish that the style section was what it was before because I thought it's always what I turn to in the New York Times now, but we don't get the Post anymore because of what's happened.
Yeah.
But so because Kay Graham is so well known, was she somebody who you felt gave you kind of free reign, or did you have a lot of interaction with her?
Who?
With Catherine Graham.
Okay, yeah. Well, she and Ben were very close.
Yeah,
They were really, really tight. They loved each other. And at first, Kay wasn't too thrilled when Ben left Tony for me because
yeah,
she just, she wasn't crazy about Tony, but, because Tony had sort of opted out of the newspaper life and the social life. But I think she thought that it might interfere with her relationship with Ben, which it did not.
hmm.
But I remember when the very beginning when Ben and I were together, we used to go away for the weekends. He had a cabin in West Virginia, a log cabin. We go up to West Virginia, and usually on the weekends, Ben had lunch on Saturdays with Kay and Phil Zana at the editorial page and several of the other people. And she had looked for those the highlight of her week, those lunches. And Ben stopped going because he was taking me to the country. And she said to somebody, I've lost my editor on the weekends. And yeah, I can see she was feeling bereft a little bit. But I really liked her, and I think she came to like me, once she realized that I was not going to interfere with her relationship with that. Not only that, but I would encourage it.
Mhm.
And I just admired her more than I can think of anybody else in my life. She
Mhm.
was just, she, how she writes about how insecure she was, and she was. I mean, she didn't think she was attractive, and I remember when she talked about the Kennedy years, when Jackie and all the women came in, they were all so beautiful and chic, and she felt like an ugly duckling. And and then Phil killed himself, her husband, and yet she managed to take over this paper and deal with all these men and run it in the most brilliant way ever. She was extraordinary, and her relationship with Ben was amazing. They had such a incredible way of communicating. I mean, she'd come down to Ben and she'll complain about something in the paper, and he would say to her, he called her Catherine, Catherine, get your finger out of my eye. And she would say, okay, Ben, but
Playful. Yeah. But
always very playful. And he made her laugh. She would come down in the afternoons about 5 o'clock right after, no, before story conference and schmooze with Ben for about a half an hour. Just want to know what was going on and who was doing what. And he also got a lot of stories from her because she was out on the town every night. She was out to parties and she gave him a lot of scoops,
really.
a lot of information. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they not only they enjoyed each other, but and he respected and admired her. And she felt admired and respected by Ben.
She did.
Oh yeah, and it was real because he had enormous respect and admiration for her. Um, and a lot of the men who worked for her did not.
Mm-hmm.
They would sort of say, "Yes, yes, dear, you sit at the end of the table, and we'll take over."
It's
But Ben listened to her, and
yeah.
so that was a fantastic. And then she and I don't know how we got to be really good friends, but we did.
You did. Oh, okay. So
Somewhere along the line, we got to be really close friends, and we talk on the phone, and
yeah.
we we the night of the Nixon resigned, I was I was covering the White House, so I was at the White House when Nixon resigned, and I came back to the office, and it was very somber. And Ben had gone around the office and said, "Okay, no gloating, no gloating. This
Mm-hmm.
is serious. This is a sad day for the United States of
Yeah.
America, and this is not a fun story. We're going to cover it straight the way it." And Kay came downstairs into Ben's office. She said, I don't want to go home alone tonight, and I don't have anything to do. Can I have dinner with you and Sally? And we didn't have any plans, so we took her to this little pub on the corner of Wisconsin and M and Nathan's, and we went and had cheeseburgers. And we got to the table, and the waiter came over and asked for what we wanted to drink, and Kay said, "No champagne."
You're not celebrating. I
No.
love that. Yeah. When Nathan's was a great place. I
The
remember.
other thing is that what the Gridiron Club,
Hmm.
what the Gridiron Club is the journalist, and Ben was the first person to ever turn down membership in the Gridiron Club. And I was the first woman to ever turn down membership in the Gridiron Club.
Why?
Ben turned it down because there were no blacks and no women.
Wow.
So by the when then they took in blacks, they had a black member, and then they decided they should better have women members. But before that, they invited Kay as a guest. And so she didn't know what to do because she wasn't invited to be a member, but she was invited to be a guest. So she assembled a group of about 8 of us, women, in the newsroom. to see what we think. And
Wow.
so I said, she got to me and I said, well, I can't remember exactly what I said, but it was something like, well, what would you think if they said that if you were black, you could be a guest, but you couldn't be a member? How would you feel about that? And she said, I wouldn't feel very good about it. So she decided not to go at the advice of all of us. So we decided to picket. And so we went out in front of, and there are all our male friends, journalists in white tie and tails, and they're having to cross the picket line. They're so embarrassed. They're going like this, and we're all saying, you know, you male chauvinist pig, male. And we had our posters and flex, what do you call them? Uh, Boards with all these awful things written on them, um, and Kay said she couldn't stand it. So Meg Greenfield, who was the editor of the editorial page, who was also a fantastic woman, Meg and Kay got in Meg's car, and Meg drove around the block so she could watch. And Kay was hiding on the floor of her car and kept peeking out the window to see, watch us picket and see what was going on.
Did they change the rules shortly after that? Did you make
Yeah.
it? Yeah. And why did you decide not to be a member?
Well, because Ben wasn't a member,
And
and if I never belonged to a club in my life, and I don't know, I just didn't feel like belonging to a club.
interesting. You're not a member of a country club or anything?
Never.
Really? So
My parents belonged to club. They were Chevy Chase Country Club and
yeah.
an Army Navy Club and Celebrate Club, and but I was not. I just didn't. I don't like. And Ben had never. The only club he ever belonged to was at Harvard, the
Yeah.
AV club at Harvard. He didn't believe in clubs either. So
We only have a few minutes left, so I want to make sure I give you a chance too, because are there any other women you would want to talk about who have inspired you, who shaped who you are? I mean, it sounds are there other friends that you would want to mention that have played a role?
well, I haven't said enough about my mother because my mother was a very strong woman, and she, you know, as most military wives do, she held the family together. My father was at war twice and would be away on maneuvers for months at a time, and she had three kids to deal with. Um, but one of the things she always said to me was, I mean, from the time I can remember, was you've got to find a way to have your own money and not depend on a man. It's really important to have your money. And she said, I don't have the ability to make my own money because we're never one place long enough for me to get a job. I can sell real estate, but that doesn't really bring me any money. But she said, the most important thing in life is for you to have your own money because then you'll have confidence and you won't just be dependent. Because in the military, they even use the word dependence. We were all dependents of my father,
Mhm.
and she hated that we were dependents. And she said, you don't ever want to be a dependent again.
Wow.
And so, you know, when I ended up working at the Post and I started saving my money, and when Ben and I got together, um, we were renting an apartment in the Watergate for the first.
Hmm.
Interestingly enough, right, right. This is after Watergate. We were living together during Watergate, but um, we rented an apartment and then we decided to buy a house. And I said, I want to buy the house because I want it to be my house because I don't want to be dependent on you. So that if we break up, I have to leave the house. I don't want that. So we bought a little house near DuPont Circle and I bought it with my own money.
I love that. Your mom was a feminist. I
Yeah. Oh.
I think that word is so loaded, but that's
Well,
absolutely.
you know, the thing is that the women at that point it wasn't a thing really. I mean, Gloria hadn't started her thing, and well, both Gloria Steinem and Betty Friedan both went to Smith, and I went to Smith too, and so
I went
Gloria,
to Barnard and I almost went to Smith. I went to Barnard, one of the
oh
seven
yeah,
schools. I love Smith. Beautiful.
um, but when when I went to Smith, when I was the year I graduated was when Betty Friedan came out with The Feminine Mystique.
God.
And that made a huge impression on me, huge. And I didn't want to get married when I got out of college. I mean, anytime soon I wasn't. And the mantra at Smith was a ring by spring for the seniors.
Mhm.
Everybody wanted to get married. In fact, I got engaged many times because I thought I should be married and then realized that that was not going to happen. Um, but that so Betty was had a huge effect on me. Her book did, and but when you these people when you get to know them, Betty she was a difficult woman, and there were, but I was more on Betty's wavelength than I was on Gloria's
Mhm.
because Betty basically was talking about women who want to be mothers and wives and have a life, but also have a career or whatever. That's what Betty wanted. Gloria was saying things like a woman needs a man, like a fish needs a bicycle, and who needs men, and people, you don't need to be married, you don't need to have children, and I think a lot of people were hurt by that because they thought that that was the thing. You should not care about men, and if you have a relationship, you have to divide everything. So who makes the bed one day and who washes the dishes, and it just got to be crazy.
Sally, I have less than a minute on this Zoom. Can I send you another one for like a 5-minute wrap up of our
Yeah,
conversation?
sure.
I'll send you another Zoom request now.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. The point, I love the points you're making about feminism at that time, the Betty Friedan versus the Gloria Steinem. You knew them both personally then?
I'm sorry, what?
Did you know them both personally?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I ended up being very close friends of Betty's. And she used to bring her child over to play with my son Quinn when we were in East Hampton. She'd come over and they'd swim and we'd hang out together. But I mean, I gather Betty with other people could be hell on wheels, but she was always great to me and always very, very wise, I thought, about women. She wanted a boyfriend, she would like to have had a boyfriend. It just didn't work out for her in the end, um,
You were
but
saying that
she
Gloria's
was very family oriented and all that.
you were saying that Gloria Steinem might have set women, not set women back, but I don't want to put words in your mouth, but done some damage with some of the rhetoric about not needing a man. What do you think that some women gave up, that part of their lives with the idea that they didn't need it and they could just focus on their careers and then they ended up feeling
I
alone?
think I know. I not only do I think it, I know it.
Yeah.
And I remember one day I was sitting in the newsroom and this one of the reporters came over to me. She was like almost 40, and we were chatting and she suddenly just turned bright red and she said, "I have something I have to admit to you." And I said, "What?" She said, "I'm pregnant." And she just got really embarrassed. She said, "I'm really embarrassed to say this because I don't know how to tell anybody in the newsroom because they're all going to look down on me because I'm pregnant. Because, I know it's not the thing we should be doing right now. We should be concentrating on our careers." And it was that kind of thing where people would, I don't need a man. And that was kind of like the cool thing for women. I gather that some of that's going on now with younger women. We
Yeah.
don't need men in our lives, and it made people think they didn't need a man in their lives, and or they shouldn't. It was more they shouldn't. They shouldn't need a man in their lives. They shouldn't need children. They should be their own person. They should concentrate on their careers and their work and their reputations. And then when they suddenly got too old to have babies or felt that it wasn't enough, it was too late.
Have you been following what AOC has been doing? She's
Freezing our eggs.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a really brave, great thing because I do, to your point, I think if you focus on your career for so long and suddenly you're 36 and you got to figure this out, I think that's wonderful. But there
No,
is,
I think it's great that she's freezing her eggs. I'm glad for her that she's doing that. I think she knows because, I didn't think I wanted children.
yeah.
Um, and I didn't think I wanted to get married. And then I met Ben and we started living together. We didn't get married till 5.5 years later after we'd been living together. I
Mm,
didn't think I wanted children. He didn't either because he already had 3 kids and he was 60 years old. He was 20 years older than I was. And I suddenly one day said, I have to have a baby. And he said, wait a minute. We had a deal. You didn't want to do this. And he said, I'm too old to have a father. I won't be able to run around with my little kids. And I don't want to be up at 3 in the morning,
yeah.
with babies and all that. And I said, well, I didn't, I changed my mind. I mean, I didn't decide to change my mind. It's just one day I was walking down the street and I saw this woman coming, really pretty young woman and she was pregnant and she was wheeling a baby carriage, the cutest baby you've ever seen in your life. And
Mhm.
I just doubled over. I just kind of went like this and grabbed my womb. And
Mhm.
I thought, oh my God, I've got to have one. I've got to have a baby. And it was just a physical need. I
Yeah.
had to have a baby.
Yeah.
So I said, the only way I convinced him, he said, I don't want to have a baby. I said, well, let me put it this way. I'm going to have a baby. It's either going to be yours or somebody else's. And I'm not talking about artificial insemination.
So he gave in. He gave.
So guess what? Quinn was born.
My God. And did you and this is okay. I have I have a final question because I think tried to do this. Do you think that women can have it all in that way? Like when Quinn was born, did you find that you had to take a big step back? Um,
I didn't, what happened was Quinn was born with a hole in his heart. And he had open heart surgery when he was 3 months old, and he was in and out of the hospital until he was 16. So I literally had to take a leave of absence from the paper, and I didn't work. I wrote 2 novels during that time, but I couldn't go to the office because he was. I spent a lot of time living with him in the hospital. I mean, he was sick all the time. He had all kinds of horrible operations and illnesses, and he was near death
like
many times. And so it wasn't exactly what I had in mind, but I didn't have a choice.
yeah, yeah.
And I didn't have a choice, but not only that, Ben was his father. I was living in the children's hospital and sleeping in a bed in his room. And Ben would come to the hospital at night to visit us.
Mm,
And but the thing is talk about the difference between women and men. There is no way in the world that I would have gone back to work and Ben would have given up his job and stayed in the hospital with Quinn. It just wasn't even an issue.
hmm.
And I wouldn't have allowed it. I would have, there's no way I would have left my baby.
You needed to be
Um,
there.
I
Yeah.
had to be there. I had to be there with him. And so that sort of did me in for the next 15 or 20 years. My career was a setback, except for the couple of novels I did.
Oh, I still think of you. I guess the On Faith column then was later on because
That came later, yeah.
okay. So I mean, you hardly disappeared.
Yeah, no, I went back, but it wasn't the same really. I mean, I didn't, I went back sort of part-time and then I came up with this idea because I felt that the religion had become a huge story.
Um,
And I wrote a memo to the editor saying we're not covering religion the way we should. I mean, the Sunnis and the Shias and the war in the Middle East and the Christian nationalism and all that. Nobody was writing about it much. And so he wasn't interested. So I had lunch with Don Graham and I said, we should do this. And he said, well, why don't you do a religion website for we just started WashingtonPost.com. I
Wow.
said, I said, I don't know anything about religion. I don't know anything about the internet. And he said, well, nobody's perfect. That's what Bennett said to me when he hired me. He said, can you show me something you've written? And I said, I've never written anything. He said, nobody's perfect. So twice. So I went over it was in Arlington. The WashingtonPost.com was in Arlington, Virginia, across the road, across the river.
Yeah.
And it was like being in another country. You didn't have to dress. I wore jeans. and they had the ping pong table over there and free bagels. It was just a whole different thing. And I had the best time. It was one of the most exciting times in my life professionally. I did it for 7 years until the Post ran out of money. And what's the first thing that goes is religion.
Yeah. Which is
So,
ridiculous because it's still such a huge part of
right,
Trump's rise, strangely enough.
right.
Um, one final question because I have you and I just want to, I really selfishly just want to know what you think. And Nora O'Donnell and I talk about this a lot. Do you think there will be a female president in the next 20 years? Do you
Do
think
I
it,
think there will be?
yeah. When do you think we'll see that, in the next couple of decades? I mean, you have to think that it's going to happen eventually, right? So I'm wondering if you, not that you have a crystal ball, but just in covering politics as you have, do you think that it's something that we'll see? And could it be a Republican woman? A lot of people think that will be the first female president, will be a Republican.
Well, certainly it was clear that there was going to be a black person, a president, before there was a female president. And then the question is, will there be a Jewish president? I think there would be a Jewish president before there's a woman president. But I think, let's be optimistic. I think that it could happen in the next 20 years
Yeah. Okay.
if the right woman came along. I mean, somebody like Gina Raimondo is a really strong, but she once said to me, "I'm too short."
I hope that doesn't matter. But yeah, I mean, it's
But
crazy to me.
but there's there are plenty of capable women out there, but I just think you've got to have somebody who captures people's imagination. But look at other countries have had women leaders. I don't see why we shouldn't.
I don't see why we haven't, but
Yeah,
that's a conversation for another time.
yeah, yeah. But I'm optimistic. I would say yes.
Okay. Well, on that note, I will let you go and thank you so much.
Because, by the way, women are just as smart as not, if not smarter than men. That's what I learned at Smith College, which is an all women's college, and everybody, all the smartest people there were women. So you come out of that college thinking all the smartest people are women. I've always thought that.
Amen. Well, thank you, Sally, so much. It's so great to talk to you. And again, I've been just such a fan of your work over
Well,
the
thank you
years.
so much. This has been a great interview. Good
Uh,
luck with your project.
Thank you, and good luck with you writing a book now, another novel.
My Washington memoir.
Oh, wonderful. When does that come out?
Uh-huh. When I finish it.
We'll let that go. I'll give you time to work on it now. Thank you, Sally.
Okay,
Bye.
thanks. Bye.
Bye.